booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Hi, I'm Claudette, radiographer at the radiology departments at the community hospital. We offer high-quality service with state-of-the-art equipment in X-ray, ultrasound, CT, and mammogram. Come, our friendly staff awaits you.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
WESN.
As I said, or as I keep saying, individual murders are not something I like to keep track of. And I believe I mentioned it, it was either yesterday or the day before, that somebody who is a relative, a close relative of someone I'm acquainted with, someone who has been on this show, was believed to have been killed. I don't want to make any definitive statements or facts, but for the indicators are that he was murdered. And it was done in a very isolated community that, by all accounts, I've never been there, but by accounts, they don't really have a police presence up there. And as I indicated before, earlier in the week, you know, this individual was known a lot more closely by another friend of mine, whose own family is taking that situation quite hard. And for me, I don't necessarily know Mr. Javed Omardine. Reading the accounts of his life and knowing who his father is, it highlights the direction of crime that frightens me the most. When you really have to now start to be paranoid, and you have to be so security conscious that it will probably start to run your life. I was already wary, you know, just going in and out of my house during the day, much less at night, much less if I lived in a rural community or a rural village. Because there's some appeal to that, to get away from certain aspects and the hustle and bustle, and to some extent the crime that you would find in the more populated areas. But in TNT, and I guess, you know, on the East Coast, the North Coast, the South Coast, the West Coast, in the center of the island, to what extent, where would you go now to try to escape from this situation? And now does every rural village, isolated community, mountain community, fishing village, do they all need to now wonder what kind of criminal elements may or may not be coming through? Or was this a crime not done by someone transient, but rather by someone living in said community? Is the community bonds breaking down to that extent? And the thing about it is, these types of crimes, it's not necessarily going to be easy for law enforcement to deal with when they happen. But what you hope for is for a society to have enough respect for the law that these types of crimes would not happen. Crime prevention is one of those tricky things, right? It's not as though there's an equation to tell us how to do it step by the numbers. It takes, in part, yes, a whole host of various aspects of society to be relatively healthy. Your education system, your labor market, right? Your economy in general. Opportunities, not just to get jobs, but for entrepreneurship, to build something for yourself. Opportunities when you have maybe a relatively decent but ordinary job, that you could still live a relatively decent, average life. Average is not a bad word. The average should be feasible, practical, livable. I mean, we don't need on average people to live in mansions and drive BMWs and to have private jets and to spend, $10,000 every weekend going out to the clubs and to go out to eat every night spending $1,000 on a steak. But when the average is getting a little too low for people to be able to live relatively comfortably, not extravagantly, not comfortably like I have a maid and a butler and a cook and a gardener and private security for my house, comfortably as in I have a relative middle class existence. I could pay my bills. I could pay my mortgage for my house. I could send my kids to college if they so choose to. I could save something for my retirement. I could ensure that my family is taken care of, or if I don't have a family, that I am taken care of. All of these things matter with crime prevention, but what also matters is policing. It's respect for the law, fear of consequence, but not just fear of consequence. It can't just be only that society is held together because we don't want to go to jail. But that fear of don't want to go to jail should be the tripwire, where if anybody starts to have some pervasive thoughts, it kind of gives you pause, and then hopefully better nature prevails, right? For the majority of us, we don't want to commit crimes because we don't want to commit crimes. But regardless, you need to have consequences because human psychology is basically, well, I ain't going to be a punk. I ain't going to be a fool. No one else respects any law. Why should I? That's where you start off with favors that end up into little, short-term corruption, small-scale corruption, rather. And then it grows because, first it's an inch, then it's a mile. We all did that as kids, at least. Some do it as adults today. By all accounts, this murder is especially tragic when you hear of the people who remember him. And it's not a unique situation. That's the sad part. That is, I don't even know if at this point enough people out there, whether you are listening to me or not, even find the tragedy in this latest situation. And there are probably a handful of other murders just this week alone you could arguably say might be equally as tragic. But here we have a relatively young person who was not really interfering with anybody. By all accounts. He was being interfered with, maybe. And we see what happens. Arming our population is not necessarily going to be enough to reinstill respect for the law in society. It might help, it might hurt. It might be something in the middle. with both positive and negative consequences that we might not even realize and to some extent might not even want. We have a new Minister of National Security, more on that later on in the show. He's already started communicating in the public. That is, on the face of it, a good sign, but it's just merely a first step. This is not necessarily a situation that we will put all on the authorities, all on the new minister, or even all on the old minister. At the end of the day, we could blame whoever. The blame is not actually going to fix the problem. So now, to some extent, this election may be an opportunity for the population to start to participate with fixing the problem. But it's complicated. I can't say that voting in this party or that party will be the best for whichever situation that will eventually be the various issues the parties will try to campaign on. That's up for you to decide for yourself. I just want to see more active participation at all levels, more active engagement at all levels. And to some extent, if we want to just sit down in our homes and say, oh, you see, nobody respects the law anymore. Well, yeah, in part because no one respects the democratic process anymore. We have allowed it essentially to be hijacked by the system of which we've now tolerated for how many, I guess at this point, decades, where we leave it alone, hope for the best, complain when it's the worst, and somehow expect for the sun to come up tomorrow, all the while not doing anything about it. I understand it's easy to put your head in the sand. But the sad part is, this is not a situation where none of us have skin in the game. You wouldn't let someone gamble your house on a horse race, would you? So why is it that we're allowing a political environment gamble our nation while we just essentially kind of sit on the sidelines and have our fingers crossed and hope that it all works out? This is not an indictment on any singular politician. The current cabinet, to some extent, some of them are new to their roles. This is not pointed at anybody. This is a generalization, which is something that not a lot of people, even for that, want to admit. Or if they want to admit it, they just want to take, to some extent, the easy way out. Ah, well, they're all bad. Why should I bother? Yeah, but too many people kept saying that over the years. And dare I ask the question, has it gotten better or has it gotten worse? We're averaging around 600 murders now. And that's just one of the obvious indicators of where society has reached. I'm telling you once again, at some point, things that we thought were sacred and untouchable, that will never happen here, it will happen. People will get targeted. Violence will spread and escalate and start to reach out to sections of the country that was never hit before in that way. And then what we're going to do? We're just going to say, how did this happen? Well, I'm telling you how it happens. Everybody wants to talk about solutions. But there's no silver bullet to deal with these issues that we've allowed to grow to this point without dealing with how we engage with our politicians. It's not that they take all the blame. We have not engaged in the democratic and political processes to the full extent of our civic responsibilities. To some degree, the decisions they make are based on what we tell them we want. of what they think we want, of what they think will get them re-elected. Thus, we have reached this point. Yeah, it's not that simple, but what do I always say with regards to crime? We still have to do our part. If the authorities don't do their part, then it's on them. If we don't do our part, we are not blameless in the equation. This is one of those incidents where, and I hate to say it because you don't want it to necessarily be that, oh, well, just because you know the person, you feel more for them. But the fact of the matter is, I don't just have a picture to a name. I know a couple of the people in the picture. And I know who they are and what they stand for. And I know that we all think it wouldn't happen to us, right? We go through life. Nah, it won't happen to us. Crime is a thing that happens in the news to other people. Oh, that's so unfortunate. You know, oh gosh, those poor parents. Oh gosh, those poor children. Oh gosh, that poor community. Well, when the victims' families are someone that helps take care of you, one of your service providers, that's part of your community. It's basically reached you. It's no longer some pie in the sky fare. I am no more special than Mr. Javid Omadine. My community is no more special than Brasso Seco. Maybe it's because I know that there was, I believe, a double homicide on my street when I was much younger. That happened way back then. Well, what could happen now? I feel for all of the victims and the victims' families. That's one of the reasons why I can't follow all of the news, all of the murder reports. But now we've reached the point where it's hard to ignore. So what are we going to do about it? Now let's take a break. When we come back, we'll kick off today's Daily Review. Stay tuned. This is Dr. Bernard WSN. Sean Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
Let's
go
go to the last part.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, believe it or not, I won't name names, but I actually scheduled, or had 2 people on the schedule to join me for today's show. But unfortunately, neither of them, it seems, can't make it. But it does afford me the opportunity to do a little bit of house cleaning, because there is one story I think 1 or 2 viewers at the very least probably are surprised I haven't necessarily spoken about it yet. And I didn't necessarily want for the whole week to pass, because I would have had to some extent speak about it an entire week late, right, if it spilled over into next week. So I'll take the opportunity, since I have the time, to dive into one of the other things that got overshadowed by all of the whole, Prime Minister stepping down and replacement and election call. Something else kind of happened that was a big deal. And I guess the timing is, I don't know if this was done intentionally, but it is what it is. What am I speaking about? Well, before I actually get into the details, let's kick off today's daily review. So I have not been shy about my opinion with regards to the airport project. The airport project. The new A&R Robinson International Airport. The design is actually interesting. I didn't necessarily realize what they were going for until some of the current pictures, although they're still showing construction, so, since it's open, I didn't want to show pictures of the airport still technically under construction. But I don't know if it's supposed to be like a flag pattern. Not too sure why they did like this weird kind of zigzag design, but it is what it is. Part of the airport is right on the road. There's a part of me that wonders if that's good for security. It doesn't seem as secure as Piarco. Then again, the old Crown Point Airport wasn't necessarily that secure. But the flip side is, I don't know what are the plans for the old road, the Storby Local Road or Old Road. Traffic usually is to some extent free-flowing there. Crown Point is kind of at the end of the line. You don't have people transitioning back and forth right in front of Crown Point, the old terminal. So it's been open. The price currently, I don't know if this includes all of the money spent on the project, but I believe this might be just the price for construction. Maybe I'm wrong. It's at US $129 million, US $129,839,000 and change. When you work it out, I think it was north of 800 million TT, if you just use 6.7 to calculate it, right? I don't know to what extent the government would use what exchange rate. It is what it is. Some of the analysts or some of the stakeholders that have spoke after the fact, there have been mixed responses. I know Diane Hadid, she was very positive on the airport even from before. She was looking at certain efficiencies with Crown Point historically, but the problem was she was looking at 2005 figures. Now, as someone who has observed tourism in an anecdotal but close and personal way, I have seen firsthand, to some extent, the rate of visitors or the presence of foreigners on the island and the time periods that they are on the island shrink. There used to be more months where more foreigners would be essentially in Tobago in significant numbers in multiple hotels. Now it seems that certain parts of the year, yeah, you might get one or two here and there in a hotel here or a guest house there. When you add it all together, it wouldn't necessarily be that significant with regards to the driving the economy of the island in the moment. And you only really get foreigners in a significant way around January, maybe February. Not even to say December or March, right? And it wouldn't even be for 2 months. It really would be like January, depending maybe into February, maybe not. One of the things that, an account that I heard of is our situation is so cheap, it's so affordable, and there's so much that Tobago has going on for it that it makes you wonder, how is it that other islands, which are not necessarily any more closer or cheaper to travel to in the Caribbean, have a larger tourism market than we do? So she's quoting 2005 figures of 80,000 to 90,000 annually, but have since decreased significantly. And the thing is, I don't really see how the airport was the problem. Because I would hazard a guess that before 2005, those figures held true, if not were even higher. So now we have this thing that's supposed to be able to take 3 million visitors a year, and I believe Dr. Vanis James basically said what I wanted to say, or to some extent have been saying the whole while. He says there's going to be a white elephant for the next 25 to 30 years. Because, and I believe he rightfully points out, this is how he puts it. I never put it this way, so this is how he puts it. The foundation on which an airport can be productive for you will have to be laid prior to building the airport. And usually we fall, it seems as though the minds of our tourism sector, or at least from the government side, the ministry / tourism company, I can't necessarily speak for the THA, but I think to some extent even with regards to the THA's division of tourism, they are hung up on, oh, nicer airport, nicer hotel rooms equals more guests. Well, first of all, to some extent, because of our lack of planning, the developed parts of our tourism sector, you know, the actual, where the hotels are, where the concrete is, where the restaurants are, where the activities are, compared to some of the other islands, we look very unprofessional at best and disorganized, amateurish at worst. What we have, ironically, is the untouched parts of Tobago. We have advantages no other island has. And to some extent, that is what drove tourism in the past, and somehow we don't know how to utilize it, market it. And word of mouth only goes so far as the various private stakeholders have to fight this uphill battle to market the entire island just so that they could try to get some customers from abroad of what used to be. It used to be so much more. Tobago used to earn a lot more foreign exchange. No consideration has been given to the industry as a whole, merely room stock, and now the airport. In part, from what I understand, the airlines keep saying, oh, you need better rooms, you need more high-end rooms. Right, and then they built Magdalena, they built Tobago Hilton. What happened? It wasn't profitable enough. Hilton said, you all need to renovate it. We out. So they renovated it to Magdalena. What happened? Now, reportedly, they want to sell it. Now, granted, one of the other things with regards to this whole situation is the Prime Minister dropped hints that Sandals, the former Prime Minister, the Sandals project might be back on the table. At the budget, at last year's budget, they mentioned a new hotel project in the, generally speaking, I don't want to say the actual original location for the Sandals project, but probably in that same area, right? It might not take up the exact same square footage, the exact same plots of land, but generally that area that was looked at for the Sandals project, they might still look to have a hotel there again. Business-wise, if you look at the business side of it and the economy side of it, you cannot help an industry that is struggling by building more competition for said industry. Sandals is a fully contained operation. The amount of opportunities it potentially will provide to the people of Tobago will be limited. Watson Duke said something interesting that makes me think that I don't know if he really fully understands how a business works or how tourism works. He says he will support Sandals, but only if Tobagonians get top jobs. If you're going to open a hotel, the likes of which we have never seen before, because again, Sandals is an all-inclusive, self-contained, you don't leave Sandals. You eat, sleep, go to the pool, you beach activities, whatever, it's all there, right? This is the type of comprehensive operation that we don't see in Tobago. Now Watson Duke is saying he wants people to have top jobs. We are opening a new business. You have to hit the ground running. This is not on-the-job training time for your general manager and your senior staff. So when it opens, I don't even know if any locals will qualify for top jobs, because usually when a franchise like this, what are they going to do? They're going to probably try to bring in people who have management experience to do for the first, I don't know, year, 2 years on a temporary basis. Then the trick is, will they get satisfactory individuals to take over locally? And we could try to mandate that all we want. But let's not get it twisted. Depending on the arrangement, if it is like Magdalena and Hyatt and Trinidad Hilton, we will probably or potentially build the hotel ourselves and own the hotel ourselves. So if Sandals thinks that we're making life too hard for Sandals, Sandals will pull out. And at the end of the day, the number one reason why you try to have a Sandals in your country is not because you want to have this well-run hotel. To some extent, you could do that without Sandals if you properly thought it out, planned it out, didn't do any stupidness, didn't donkey up the scene, as the Prime Minister says. Although implementation in this country is not necessarily that easy. Yes, they have the experience. Yes, they have the institutional knowledge. You want that too. But the number one reason is the brand name. Is the machine behind Sandals. Is the fact that they will potentially help market the island by saying Sandals Tobago. And to some extent, Sandals will probably realize, wait, you want us to market the island for you? I don't know what kind of concessions, what the negotiations will be like. Usually Sandals wants tax breaks. The secondary industries to the tourism sector, like restaurants, nightlife, and the like, they're probably not going to necessarily see a boost from Sandals. You might think, oh, people will go to Sandals and then they'll discover Tobago. Well, to some extent, they won't really discover Tobago if they only stay in Sandals. But the majority of the customers who come to Sandals and enjoy it, most likely, if they come back to Tobago, they'll go right back to Sandals. What about the rest of the hotels, the rest of the restaurants, the rest of the shops, the rest of the dive shops, beach activities, boat tours, you know, vehicle tours to go up the island, to go to the waterfall, to go to the chocolate plantation, all of that. Will Sandals engage? I don't know. Their MO doesn't suggest that they will. But we want the brand name, right? So if you want the brand name, they know it. They're going to probably look at the numbers of visitors to the island and they're going to say, well, you have to listen to us if we want this to be successful. There's a world where the Sandals projects make sense, you know, but it's not so easy to just say, you know, we build it and they come and that's it. That is the mentality too often in tourism. We build something and people should show up, right? Not necessarily. And therein lies the issue going back to the airport, to the original. Will it be a white elephant for the next 25 to 30 years, as Dr. James says? I fear it will. Not because there's anything wrong with the airport. There's nothing wrong with the new airport, as far as I'm aware. There were things wrong with Napa, but I don't know if there's anything wrong with the new airport. Hopefully there's not, because the severity of the consequences for that will be on a whole different scale. But what are we going to do to get the customers? Because, and I've said this before, an airport does not attract visitors. At the end of the day, the airport, yes, you want it to look nice, but primarily because you want it to look clean. But the real issue for an airport is, does it have the capacity to meet the demand, the needs of the industry? Does it have the capacity for planes to land? Does it have the capacity to process all of those people that you hope will be coming to get their bags, to go through customs, etc., etc.? Well, at the end of the day, the sad truth of the matter was, I'm fairly certain the old airport was not operating at capacity. If you wanted this new behemoth of a structure, behemoth for Tobago's current needs, we needed to see some of the work done to actually justify having this extra capacity. Because if the demand is still at a low level, raising capacity is not going to necessarily help. Because at the end of the day, the airport is not the product. We're not raising capacity of production for our product line. We're raising capacity for our distribution, for part of our logistics. That's crazy. Think about it. I'm a soft drink manufacturer. I don't increase my market share. I don't increase my soft drink production, but I'm going to increase the number of trucks I have to deliver soft drinks. But I'm not one of the popular brands. I'm one of the niche brands that aren't that popular. But I want to have the same distribution, logistical resources as the big popular brands. I don't have the market share. I don't have the customer base. I don't have the production, but I want to have the trucks on the road. Empty trucks, empty airport. Maybe I'm wrong. The problem is I have no reasonable indicator to say I'm wrong. The airport might end up just being another job opportunity situation. You get a job, and you get a job, and you get a job. What will probably happen is domestic flights will probably have to go through that airport when, I could be wrong, but I remember seeing that this international airport is not for that, but because I don't really see how we could justify operating two airports. We don't have anything close to 3 million visitors for the country, much less the island of Tobago by itself. So that's where we reach on this. Again, I don't want to see the new airport be underutilized and be a potential failure. I do understand it's an investment for the future, but to some extent, it is not necessarily the most productive way to help the tourism sector. And depending, if similar decisions are made from this point forward, we will end up with an asset that cannot justify the price paid for it. It in and of itself isn't going to do anything for us. All right, let's move on to the next story. Finish out some of the things coming out this week. This is one of those things where I'll be honest. Look, I don't necessarily want any politician to fail, right? I don't want to have to talk about negative things about them. And I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on the matter yet because I don't know enough, in my opinion, to have a strong opinion. But I do have to at least acknowledge it. and not look like I'm trying to hide from it or run away from it. And that is the whole situation with the now Prime Minister Young having people make accusations of him from back when he was a secondary school student. This, generally speaking, I don't necessarily like it when all of a sudden somebody comes from out of the woodworks and levels an accusation from years ago. Because to some extent, he's been a minister for 10 years, right? And then he was the heir apparent for however many months. The timing of it as, oh, he gets sworn in and now these things happen. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that the person revealing the accusation is doing so in bad faith. I just have to acknowledge that the fact is, recent history has shown, sometimes when it happens, when these things are dug out from the past, they're not dug out with good intentions of trying to expose the bad guy, even if the person is guilty of doing something bad, but rather it's done to gain something, achieve something with regards to a personal agenda. With that said, that doesn't exonerate Stuart Young for any responsibility of what may or may not have happened. I can't remember if we spoke about it yesterday on air. My knowledge of the situation is very limited. Apparently, the student in question that is reported to have retaliated against Mr. Young back then was expelled. I don't know to what extent it was justifiable or not. But the point is, we have his responses to the situation today. And to some extent, as an initial response, it's not necessarily the best thing with regards to what the public probably wants to hear on a responsible level, on the basis of accountability of what we should hear. Because he's not necessarily saying he's innocent. He's kind of, I don't want to say deflecting, but he's saying just enough so that he doesn't have to say more in the moment, in the short term. So he's saying just enough to kind of give him some breathing room. The modus operandi with regards to public speaking in this country, not saying that's what he's doing here, is that basically you try to stall the situation and hope that it dies down. Will that happen here? Is that what Stuart Young is going for in this situation? I don't know. I can't say. I won't say that. But I will point out, he did not necessarily come out defensive or aggressive against his accusers and try to counterattack them. So at least on that front, there's some positive there. It was handled professionally, but it did not allow for a resolution or even the beginnings of a resolution to the situation. So because of that, I have to have some amount of pause on this. I can't necessarily say it's all positive. The only reason why I'm saying it's not all negative is because it's incomplete. But when you have something like this, and you basically just kind of feed us an incomplete statement that doesn't really offer us anything decisive, well, to some extent, an objective person can't fully judge the situation. All we could do is wait and see. Anybody with biases will probably warp their perception in the situation based on their biases. So, it would be interesting to see how Prime Minister Young handles this situation, because one of the things that he did say leading up to him being sworn in as Prime Minister, weeks before he was going to look at the education system, he did have that meeting with the religious leaders. That, to some extent, it's at the top of the lower third. That should be the real story, at least right now. So, but even that, to what extent is it somewhat incomplete? We're getting a preliminary situation. I don't know if the Minister of Education was present at this meeting. That brings up a whole next set of questions in that situation, but I don't want to speculate on that. Yes. I think I'm seeing her there. No, I can't be sure. I can't be sure who that person is. This is one of the issues. I have kept saying that the education system is one of those critical issues that I do think the country is underestimating. Parents in the moment know not all parents are going through a bad situation with a bad outcome, but to some extent parents kind of all know, but at the same time, for whatever reason, there doesn't really seem to be a unified voice to say, hey, this problem is kind of big, let's do something about it. Because of that, I am appreciative of Prime Minister Young saying, this is part of my agenda. But then it was a wait and see, will he actually follow through with what he said weeks ago? Now he's done, again, the first step. But we don't necessarily know how things will end up. And ironically, this is one of those situations where I go back to how I started. I really don't want to be negative, right? I don't want for this bullying incident to happen. The difference between me and somebody who would be acting in bad faith is I'm not willing to cover up the situation, but I fear that this bullying incident might actually impact his work on the education system, depending on how far he actually was willing to go. Can't cover it up, can't hide it for the sake of the greater goal or any nonsense like that. It is what it is, but it's already something where I would like to see government do more. I know that it would be a challenge, even if they are well-intentioned, for them to do more. The last thing I want is to see scandal to make it even harder. Which is why not having a resolution for the bullying situation, the longer that goes on, the more nervous I am that we won't get a resolution for potential improvements in the education system. All right, let's move on to the last story in today's Daily Review. We have a new Minister of National Security. And it's interesting. I guess to some extent he is starting by putting his money where his mouth is, in a way, although this might be a bit of a low-hanging fruit situation. Yes, there's a general election coming up. Yes, he's now been sworn in as the Minister of National Security. He has already started engaging with the public. This is one of the ministers that did a better job engaging with the public. And I've pointed out his better, or dare I say, superior communication skills or practices. Yes, he has not been perfect. But one of the things that he did point out to the media was the fact that, look, it seems as though after speaking to his predecessor, he's saying that it seems as though national security has not necessarily done a good job with communications, with public communications. So this is one of the things that he is hoping to improve upon. But also, he mentioned something very interesting to me. That his approach will be guided by strong management structures. The quote is, the principles of management remain consistent, holding people accountable, including managers. That is the foundation of our approach. And then he goes on to say, I just had another conversation with the Commissioner of Police as a follow-up to previous discussions. And then he goes on with regards to, I guess, some, he has a plan. I don't want to go too far with it to kick somebody while he is rhetorically down. But we are now focusing on a divisional level, right? The concerns of the Western Division may differ from those of Northeast, Central, or Southwest Division. His strategy is to address crime at the divisional level, ensuring the divisional managers are held accountable for their respective areas. And there was either in this report or in other reports where he said, you know, about giving the resources that the various divisions need. Not necessarily, I don't believe he said in any way that he will be micromanaging the divisions, but rather consulting with them, keeping up to date on what's going on with them, seeing what they need and doing his best, I would imagine, to try to provide those needs. This might be one of those areas where I don't know to what extent he understands the resources available to him, what is actual critical expenditures that he can't change, what wiggle room he has, maybe that he could change, cut, siphon, what have you. So to what degree would he be able to meet all of the financial and resource needs of the various divisions without potentially impacting on other areas of national security? That's basically a budget thing. That's limited by the national budget and the budget allocation. Yes, national security gets one of the larger allocations, only top 3, I believe, regularly. But that doesn't mean that they get enough, particularly with regards to where national security is now. But that is a practical problem that he will only be able to speak about, you know, with more time actually looking into the situation. At the end of the day, there's 2 things he touched on, and those 2 things are very important to me. Communication, that speaks to transparency, and accountability. That speaks to a meritocracy. Reward those who do the work and those who don't do the work. Not those who try and put in a reasonable effort for their position and for whatever other reason besides their effort and their proficiency, it fails. Yes, it's not always going to, you could do everything right, it's not always going to work. But accountability is when you don't do the work, when you do the wrong thing, when you don't make a human mistake, but when you make a mistake, the kind of which there isn't necessarily an excuse, the kind of which is questionable if it's intentional or not. You hold people to account. They face consequences for these things. You send a clear signal that this type of behavior won't be tolerated. All of a sudden, an organization will start to be more accountable. At the end of the day, leaders have to lead, managers have to manage, otherwise things will fall off the rails. That is human nature. And there are some people in society where they actually will be, to some extent, better members of society if in those situations where they are supposed to follow, they are being properly led. And if they're not being properly led, they might actually borderline be the bad apples. They don't have to be bad apples. Not everybody is meant to be a leader. Some people are followers by their nature. And the outcomes are bad when they're being improperly led. But at the end of the day, you could go into human psychology and all of these various things and overcomplicate it. The minister is saying, hey, principle of management, remain consistent. Hold people accountable, including managers. And in his case, it's not his job to go and hold the lowest rank of police officer and Coast Guard enlisted to account. His job is to hold their bosses to account. And I do believe, to some extent, we've seen some results with WASA, not saying that it was perfect. So I have some confidence that, hey, giving enough time and enough support, he might be able, not necessarily to solve crime, but at least help the police reach a point where they would be better positioned to deal with crime. One of the other things that he said, besides pledging more open communication, that will be tricky. I don't know to what extent he will either, one, be able, with regards to his own judgment, to navigate to what extent he could communicate what to the public, but then also to what extent he will be allowed to, either by the circumstances or with regards to the larger dynamics of cabinet, of parliament, etc., etc. But one of the things he did say is he wants to make the Morris Student Report public. Now, cynics might bash him saying, well, what about the TSCT report? He has publicly said he hopes that the new Minister of Public Utilities will make it public. But, I mean, to people on the outside looking in, it's easy for him to say that we kind of only really care if it happens or not. I think it's similar with regards to the Maurice Greendot reports. He's saying it now to some extent. He's saying he's reading the reports to determine what he could reveal. I think to some extent, if you want to be seen as someone promoting open communications and transparency, these sort of things matter. And to some extent, trying to hold managers to account depending on what is the contents of the report, these sorts of things matter, because if you do it internally, yes, if a bank wants to handle its HR stuff internally, that's fine. If the bank breaks the law, though, if employees in the bank break the law, to what extent could it still remain private? If it's negligence, to what extent, negligence to the point where it's potentially criminal, to what extent could it still be private? So with regards to when you potentially may have feelings with, say, the police service, the fire service, the Coast Guard, etc., to what extent should those things remain private? For why? In order to protect the reputation and the integrity of the institution? We have long passed the point where our national security institutions have a reputation to protect. They have reputations that need rehabilitation, which means a lot of hard work, which means you need to work on transparency and communication, which means revealing this report, the Maurice Greendot report, to the public will go, I don't know if it'll go a long way, but it definitely would help once done responsibly. It's potentially a start. But now the question is, the minister could say all these things with regards to how he wants to hold people to account and be more communicative. But like other ministries and areas of the public sector, the bad apples are not just there to be lazy, they also hinder progress, because progress means they will not have the opportunities to continue to be lazy. That's what happened to some extent with the Registrar General situation in Tobago. It's not all central government's fault. And the situation with Registrar General in Tobago is not the THA's fault either, per se. There are levels of authority that exercise control to various degrees throughout any public institution or administration. So it's not going to be an overnight success. WASA ain't fixed yet. I do think that he was working on fixing it. We'll have to see if the new minister will be able to continue that process. Maybe it would be even more difficult now. The further you advance, the harder it would be to clean up the remainder. National security might not be dissimilar to that. You might get some easy, low-hanging fruit fixes, but then there might be certain other things that are ingrained in the institutions that will be difficult to correct. Will there be the political and, dare I say, societal will to afford these corrections? Because what will happen is the bad apples will go to the unions. And the unions will cry, oh my gosh, they're victimizing the poor people. And then some of the public will see that. And because we have a lack of transparency, it will become a he said, she said. We don't like politicians, so it's hard to trust them. And then the whole thing kind of just stalls out and breaks down. Minister Gonzalez, I wish you the best. I don't hope for politicians to fail. So hopefully nothing comes up to derail his efforts. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open the phone line. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSND Content Capital. We'll be right back after this.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call, at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
And we're back and talking about the WSND Content Capital Show. Michael Small once again reminding those who are calling in, it's best if you mute your television once you're on air. Once you realize you're on air, mute your TV, because if you try to I know you want to follow the show until you get on the line, but please, when we start speaking to you on your phone, mute the television because there's a delay. Don't try and follow the show at that point in time. Just listen to your phone. With that said, we have our first caller for the morning, Diego Martin. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. A couple of issues. First one, I want to give from my vantage, a possible reason for why the former Prime Minister has been bashing the Privy Council. All right? Mm-hmm. Monday, that is what? Today, Thursday, 4 days from now, there's going to be a judgment on the Marcia seizure case against the Chief Justice. Remember, 3 judges, senior superior judges, castigated the Chief Justice. That was damning. Usually, you don't turn over, as I say, turn over or change the verdict when you have a unanimous decision in the appeal court. Something has to be wrong with the judgment. They say Monday is coming out, but usually the counsel for both sides get an insight of the final judgment 2 weeks in advance. 2 weeks in advance is we 10 days inside that 2 weeks already. So the state and the Master Caesar lawyer already know the verdict. And thinking it through, was it or will it be an adverse finding on the state that the former Prime Minister stand to rant and rave of the Privy Council? And coincidentally, the former AG package anti-bundle and gone. Because if that is so, is a damning judgment against him. Not only him, the other former AG, who is now, I think, the local government.
Yeah.
Because that started in 2017, and they appeal, and they appeal, and they appeal. All right? So that is something we have to look out for. The other issue is, how will the TPS behave during the coming elections? There is a stigma attached to the PNM, meaning they are politically affiliated. And there are a number of issues during election times. And I'm going to be one prominent one that they never resolved, the Sari Bash issue. Remember, one set of police was going down to make a charge, and another set of police basically jump in front and say, oh, thing. But the most critical one is the voter pardon issue. The charge in, I think it's in the Manning time, 2001, 2002, about 12 people for voter pardon. And it is in a particular area south of the Carney Bridge. The special branch, what has nothing to do with that, led the charge for that. The person in charge of that, I don't know how he ended up being the commissioner of police. The thing I'm getting at, did the police do their due diligence with respect to those charges? Because you charge 12 people and all of them dismissed. That is worrying that such an issue could have happened. Is either the charges were done by incompetent police, or it was done with a purpose to intimidate voters who would support a particular party. So those are the two issues. And have a nice day, and I will listen to you off here.
Thank you, caller. Anytime we have any sort of investigation into any function of government, elections, the audits, the financials, etc., white collar stuff, I am a bit wary because, to be honest, I am not too sure really, do we really have that capacity to investigate those things? You know, and then also, not just capacity, but like, do we have the mandate? Do we have the individuals to really make that determination, have the authority that cannot be questioned by anybody, right? And in part, that authority would be enough to shield any sort of reprisals, would be enough to push through any sort of obstacles, and to fight past any sort of cover-up, potentially. And I don't know, I like, who is the body? What is the part of the... Because, and I guess, yeah, maybe they exist, but I don't really understand our law enforcement enough, and I don't think we have enough of a precedent to say, these are the guys that do it. And then now, does someone need to make a complaint? Does someone need to file a report? You know, can they do it on their own? That's why I say some of the authority to, if necessary, instigate investigations into these sorts of things that could deal with the flack. We have Tunapon on the line before I go further. Good morning, caller. You're on there.
Yes, thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Sean.
Morning.
Yeah, well, this morning I would like to comment on the situation concerning tourism. I would like to tell you the truth and nothing but the truth what is taking place. In our country, we have foreign criminals making home here, in here. Plus we have the locals. And with crime, they're doing serious crime. Imagine we living in this country and we have to live scared. We have to be scared and live and locked up in our homes. And yet they do home invasion and come in and do what they have to do and harm us or kill us and go on their way. I mean, it's a serious thing. And it will affect tourism because I alone, when my relatives come, when the Christmas come and the holidays come, the amount of US they come and they spend here and they like to come on a holiday or come to spend sometime almost the whole Christmas month, and they bring a lot of money and spend their own money and bring into this country. And other many people. And I would like to know, no protection for these people. They're scared to come now. We don't know if they will ever get a chance to come back to Trinidad again, but naturally they love Trinidad. You understand? I have lots of relatives from Canada, from the States, from Europe, England, and all over the place, and they do come on holidays. And when they come, they bring lots of foreign exchange, and they spend their money and they make and leave back something for our country. And check how many more people in this country have relatives doing that. And because of that, nothing was done because of this crime, and it has escalated. Right now, our local used to invade us, but now the foreigners in here invading people. You can't be in your house, they come in and beat you and come in with guns and all sorts of things taking place when I'm looking at the news. It's frightening. We have to be scared. I even scared and worry children in school not even safe because they can go there and do and with those big machine gun and do what they want, you know. When they have those things in their hand, everybody running, nobody can control them. I want to know they have to step up and do something serious about this thing, whoever makes the government, you know. They have to be serious because it's getting bad to worse. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I mean, this is going to be one of those issues, right, that potentially is going to, it's going to be debated in and of itself, and it may or may not detract. Yes, there are going to be elements with regards of foreigners who come in with other illegal immigrants. Technically, all illegal immigrants break the law, but not all of them will be violent criminals. Some of them will, but also I think one of the key points with regards to our maritime borders is it's not, the real issue is not necessarily those who will conduct crimes that are illegal immigrants also, but rather the channel for the criminals for the drugs and the guns, right? And to some extent, yes, it might not be illegal immigrants, but it might be visitors who come in to conduct whatever and then leave, but in the course of the time that they're here, I don't even want to say stay, they might conduct violent crimes, reprisal killings, what have you. Because we don't know for sure now, the tendrils of transnational crime, how deep-rooted are they in our underground criminal part of our society. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
I listened to you speak about Tobago. Let me generalize it, and the tourism sector in Tobago. And don't agree with some of what you say, but I agree with a lot of what you said. Let me first say this, Miss Haddad, not Hadid, Sean.
Haddad, yes, sorry.
Miss Haddad's numbers, right? If you look at, she is correct in terms of the decline in foreign visitors to Tobago over the period. Now, also, Mr. James has a point. I don't totally agree with him, and let me tell you why. Okay, Tobago has you talked about the Magdalena as well, and the high-end rooms, and they built the Magdalena. The Magdalena was not built in the most ideal location.
Yep.
Mostly.
Yeah.
And that is when the state gets involved and trying to fix something. Tobago, everybody speaks about Tobago, and even in the opening of the airport, the commissioning of the airport, even Mr. The lawyer guy from Tobago, they talked about high-end rooms. I can't remember his name right now. He talked about high-end rooms as well. And let me tell you why that is so serious about the high-end rooms, Sean. Because the rooms are not on par with what you get in Grenada and in the Grenadines and St. Lucia and Barbados and even St. Kitts Nevis. They're not on par. Now, what has happened since the first iteration of the Sandals project, Sean? I have visited a lot of those hotels in Tobago. You have on, on the Crown Point side, you have what I would call two hotels there. One going back to the Baccarat NP there, and then you have Coco Reef there. On the Sherburne Road, you have four big hotels on Sherburne Road if you're going to Plymouth.
Yeah.
You have the two owned by Mr. Galbaran Singh's family. You have the one on Starfish up at the end, and the other one by that beach up by Bukude.
Yeah.
It's past Bukude. I have gone to all of them, Sean. And you know what? Because I was trying to, my daughter and I were trying to do a project in Tobago in terms of looking at what exists in terms of hotel rooms to target a market that we were looking at. And let me tell you, the team and everybody, the rooms weren't adequate enough. The service wasn't adequate enough. And the meal offerings were average. That is not what you get right. Let's call our closest neighbor in Grenada. That is not what you get in Grenada. Then we looked at what you spoke about it to the restaurants. The restaurants really is a creature of visitors. So if you don't have plenty of visitors, you're going to have issues with the restaurant.
Yeah.
So that flows back into that. We looked at places to visit as a tourist in Tobago. You had a very unprofessional, in general, the people were unprofessional in general. And one of the pet peeves was, you see those reef boats,
Mm-hmm.
the attitude, the disorganization, that was another issue. Now, everybody who trying to fix Tobago really have a heart in the right place, you know. The THA, the Tourism Authority, their hearts are in the right place. But the question is, how do you start to change this thing and where it started? And let me tell you where it started. This started when Mr. Manning gave Mr. What the head of the THA at the time? What's his name?
Mr. London?
Mr. London. Give Mr. London what he wanted. Mr. London wanted more money, and he started to give him more money, and not prioritizing, okay, how best do we spend this money in Tobago? Just he gave him the money. I believe what we need right now in Tobago, just like how the government was able to spend $840 million in Tobago to build this terminal building and upgrade the airport infrastructure. I see, because you're not seeing it in Tobago, the Tobagoanians are not, or the owners of these facilities are not putting money into them, because you have the potential of visitors. If you ain't getting the money, you're afraid to put the money in.
Well, it's not just that. A lot of hotels during COVID, basically, they are still behind.
And understand that was a feature of COVID. What needs to happen, Sean, is the state needs to. You see that infrastructure budget that Fali always talking about, increasing the infrastructure budget in Tobago. Probably it's time where the state needs to prioritize a special project in Tobago in terms of increasing, not improving the room stock, the quality of the room stock, not necessarily the volume of the room stock, but the quality of the room stock. Probably put out $300 million and start to upgrade grants, because you can't expect them to pay it back. This is an investment, just like the airport is an investment. You're making another investment into the tourism product. And you have an agency to micromanage this and put money into upgrading the stock of the rooms in Tobago. While that is happening, you also have try to. I'm not sure if it will succeed. Try to improve the quality of the staff in Tobago, because there's an issue with the staff. But I'm not going to look at it in a negative light today, because I really believe Tobago is a gem, you know. But somehow the gem keeps rolling out to the tide and keep going further in the ocean, and getting harder to reach. And that is where we have to fix. So the room stock issue will come about, and they're talking about the high end, they're talking about the standards. But I believe what is there right now, we need to improve that, because that is what you have on the ground. You have nothing else. That's what we have in Tobago, and is a chicken and egg situation. The visitors didn't want to come if it is that you don't have the high end rooms. And we'll keep on that what do you call it, on that hamster wheel.
Yeah, but caller, I do want to give you a chance to respond. The long and short of my disagreement with what you just said is, one of the few things they've tried to do over the course of multiple initiatives, multiple grants and loans over the course of many years, including or especially during this administration, is what you just said. It's always been focused on improving the room stock since forever. Magdalena was just one expression of that philosophy. Tobago Hilton was another way to express that philosophy, right? Allowing Cocoa Reef to be built was another way to express that philosophy. And the fact of the matter is, at no point in time did those initiatives make any difference. And as far as I'm aware, while yes, you might say that the room stock is inadequate, there is a difference between a room that needs renovation and a room that is poorly designed and is inadequate. And from what I understand, we're not necessarily that poor in comparison, depending on how you look at it and how you judge it, compared to other parts of the Caribbean. Because when other people go to St. Lucia or what have you, right, basically what they say is it's nothing special compared to Tobago. Tobago has more to offer as an island. And yes, Barbados rooms might be consistently nicer, newer, and more updated, but not a lot of hotels in Tobago charge the price that Barbados offers. So, like, I understand what you're saying, but part of your argument, the service is bad and the food quality is bad. Well, how are we gonna, the thing about it is they push better room stock forever, right? But yet nothing is done to improve service, and I'm willing to bet if we improve service, we don't even necessarily need to improve room stock first. If we improve just service, we would start to see improvements before we even have to touch the room stock.
Well, I don't entirely agree with what you just said there, Sean. And let me say this. One of the ways I had to, when as I said, we were doing this project, one of the ways we had to assess these things is we had to go and stay. And I told my daughter, for you to make a judgment, we go in there. We go in that hotel.
Question.
We stay 3 or 4 days.
What are you comparing the room stock to?
Okay. Now, in my previous job, I was an international traveler. So I traveled quite a lot every year. I mean, quite a lot every year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had this concept, even before, when I would go to a country and I would stay in different hotels. And I'm just going to tell you about the Caribbean area, right? Our Eastern Caribbean English-speaking neighbors. Several of them in Grenada, several of them in St. Vincent, on mainland St. Vincent, and in the Grenadines. Some of it is vacation, of course. St. Lucia, granted, St. Lucia is a place that has nice rooms, but there was something about St. Lucia that just was not, you don't get a good vibe. Place is nice, but you don't get that homely vibe.
Yeah.
I did Dominica, Antigua, St. Kitts, Dominican Republic. That is how I compared it with those markets as against what we have in Tobago.
Now, question, did you compare it when those facilities were relatively new, or with the facilities that you stayed in at the time reasonably old to say they weren't new, they weren't brand new? Because a lot of our problems is the fact that our hotels are not new, so they're going to show their age.
And rightly so.
And you get that in other parts of the Caribbean. I've heard complaints about trainees going to places like St. Lucia and like the place looks run down, and in my mind I'm like, well, was it badly maintained or was it just old? Those are not necessarily the same things.
A lot of where I stayed were hotels that were long in operation, but similar. And let me say this to you: what I try to do is look at what we have in Tobago and stay in places of similar sizes. And a lot of those places of similar sizes that we have in Tobago are older hotels.
Yeah.
Older hotels. But there was actually a particular hotel two hotels in St. Lucia, where over a period of about 5 years, where I saw upgrades going on in the hotel, the beddings, the paintings, different things that they were constantly upgrading. Every 2 years they would do something. You come and say, hey, the beddings changed. No, they have a different color scheme, and keep the place vibrant. And so I had to, because I can't compare examples. So that was how I did it. So and my thing is, in Tobago, what I see in Tobago is okay. And I'll call out one: Starfish. I was horrified at the rooms in Starfish, and I am talking about in the last 5 years. So I was horrified at the rooms in Starfish.
This is the real issue, right? And one of the reasons why I loathe when people, authority figures, just speak about room stock. Part of the reason why the room stock is what it is because the hotels are 1 year old, but also I believe in many cases they didn't really. Some places try to renovate, but the industry as a whole in Tobago, we're cheaper than everywhere else. We as an industry positioned ourselves in a different cost bracket than many other places in the Caribbean. We are a budget destination. That's one of the reasons why we can't just put good rooms. That's one of the reasons why the customer service is poor, right? Because the money in it isn't good enough. Right, but I guess my point is the room stock in and of itself, because I have seen, at least in some of the hotels that we have, which are not new, foreigners appreciate it, spend extra money, extend their stay, etc., fall in love with it. Because of the cost, but also what they get for the cost, the value, right? Up to a couple of months ago, right? So it's not all negative. Part of it is we position ourselves to not take in high-end, rich customers.
Okay, all right, Sean, and okay, stick up in right there. Okay, then I want how I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to get off there and listen to you off here. So tell me, in your opinion, because I really value your opinion, because, and you know why, you have one foot in and one foot out. We'll put it that way.
Right.
How, in your opinion, how do we start to fix this thing? What just throw it out there for us, Sean. In your opinion, how do we can't run by the airport? The building there already. Yeah, that is true. Tell me, how do we try and fix this thing in your opinion? I'll listen to your opinion.
Okay, I think the short answer is very simple. We have to work with where the industry is positioned now. For now, we could still try to improve customer service, right, and service delivery and food options. To some extent, somebody has to, there needs to be a vision for the industry with regards to trying to position it to a higher cost bracket, to a higher end customer. To some extent, the entire industry has to evolve to that point. Not to say that all the cheap options have to go away, but right now Tobago is mostly cheap options, right? And you don't have the supporting industries that are in line. So it's like, what's the point of getting rich customers when so much of everything else is operating? You might not think it's cheap, but really and truly it is cheap. When high-end customers come in and stay in Cookery for whenever, they have money to spend, and they're willing to spend it around for the experiences, because Tobago is that nice of an island. And the sad part about it is the people are a nice people, but the labor market has kind of skewed things. So the specifics, one would have to be, just like in Trinidad, and dare I say in America, although I don't agree how they're implementing it in America, The labor market needs to be, you need to stop interfering with it by trying to use government jobs to placate the population because your private sector is not able to create new jobs or new jobs people are willing to work in. So by giving them government jobs, the problem is you kind of, instead of working on the problem, you're giving them an escape clause and your private sector never gets fixed. And unfortunately, that might be more true in Tobago in a concentrated way than anywhere else. To some extent, that has to change. The effect that government hiring has in Tobago on the labor market has to change. Right? The stigma of hotel jobs, that has to change. Right? Professionalism has to change. If professionalism changes, upward mobility improves. But to start off with, it has to start in the position that it finds itself in. Tobago is positioned as a budget destination, so we can make incremental improvements there to try to help the hotels catch their collective breath. You don't want to make stark changes all of a sudden because also your current market is the local domestic market, who takes it for granted how cheap Tobago is, to be honest. But it is what it is, right? To some extent, as you gradually improve, generally speaking, there are customers from Trinidad who may be richer. Sometimes even internal tourism happens in Tobago as well, don't get me wrong. And then you could potentially, but you also have to market the island. You also have to market the island, right? Now, to what extent you need to, and that's why you need a vision. You need a vision with how Tobago is now. How do we improve the amount of customers coming in now? Improve the service delivery for what we have structured now. But what is the vision to then take us to where we potentially want to be? Identify where we want to go. How do we get there? And marketing has to be assessed, improved, implemented every step of the way. Right? In order to target the markets that we want to target. Because we could stay as a budget destination and make it work, you know, potentially. But part of the reason why we can't change overnight is the way the private businesses that we have are what we have. And we can't just yank everybody to say, increase your prices by 50% and all of a sudden we're high end. It just won't work, right? So we have to do it stably to ensure that the foundation is stable. That's the very oversimplified version of how I think it should be. The details, of course, might be a lot more complicated. It is what it is. I do believe Tobago could do it, and Tobago could actually have the best of both worlds. They could have areas for budget travelers and areas for high-end travelers, right? The island is large enough, there's enough space, and there's enough attractions that could bring people in, from bird watching, which used to be a thing in Tobago. I don't know if it's still a thing for foreigners to come in to do bird watching anymore. The waterfalls, the reefs, etc., etc. The untouched beaches to the north of the island that are mainly accessible by boat, that aren't built up with concrete. The lack of development of certain areas of Tobago, the greenery, that is part of its advantage, the natural beauty that we don't really take advantage of. There's also room with the THA's model with regards to the community and the small guest houses as well to give that authentic experience. But you need to have the vision to kind of ensure that everything could grow stably together and contribute to the industry as a whole. There needs to be a lot more vision in this and leadership. And the question is, where should it come from? Not just that it should be there. Should it come from the government? I don't know, because the government hasn't proved to really have the capacity to do so. Anyway, I'm over time. So this is an ongoing conversation that we slip into every now and then when the opportunities arise. Thanks for the calls to all of our callers, but especially Mr. San Fernando. We're going into in-depth in the conversation. This is one of those industries where I do have a lot of, I guess, not necessarily regrets, but it's a shame because I could see, as you rightfully point out, I have one foot in, I could see a bit more tangibly how it could be better. And that it shouldn't be that hard, right? It's not about an oil shortage. You know, we could do it. Tobago could do it. But part of it is they need leadership in that industry. So, with that said, make today a good day. As Mr. Shah would say, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Stay safe out there. And in doing so, it's nice to be nice. You never know who it is you're going to meet. You never know whose day you might make better just being a little bit nice to them today, including the poor customer service rep or cashier at the grocery. Don't take out your bad day on them. Pay it forward with a smile, and it might actually come right back to you. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience.
Give us a call at 235-5479
for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner. The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Still fresh in everyone's minds, for a Palestinian being accused of normalizing relations with Israel is difficult to live with in the community. But Basil Adra stands behind this joint work with the Israeli directors he's known for years.
This movie, we did it in perspective of activism. The last thing in the world I want to normalize the situation. The opposite we want is to change this reality. I'm very sad to see Israelis like ministers and settlements like organizations are against us and pushing hard against us, and BDS as well doing the same thing. It's really sad and bad, even though I have a lot of respect for the BDS and its work and its activists.
Meanwhile, illegal settlements have been spreading in the hills south of Hebron. Tiny outposts have sprung up between Palestinian villages. Parcels of land have been declared military zones and made inaccessible by the Israeli army. Palestinian shepherds suffer daily harassment from the settlers.
Every day there are problems, particularly in the Masafayata region and the villages around Hebron. It's like that day after day.
A unique form of activism has taken shape between Israelis and Palestinians in order to deal with the attacks.
I am volunteering in Masafriyat in defensive presence. Basically, if there's a non-Palestinian with Palestinians when they're farming, or is less likely to be violence against them, and if there is, I can film it.
This video was filmed by Basil Adra on the 13th of October 2023. It shows a settler shooting a Palestinian man in the stomach. We met the victim at his home.
There was a soldier with them. Normally the army should have come between us and told him to back off, but they gave him complete freedom to do as he pleased.
A year and a half after the attack, the settler who shot Zachariah has not faced justice. Zachariah has been unable to work to support his 4 children.
I still haven't recovered 100% feeling here. Maybe in 3 or 4 months' time, in July, the doctors will do another operation. The settlers have changed their behavior since October 7th. Wherever they go, there are problems. It wasn't like this before.
The United Nations says that violence in the region has also pushed more than 300 families to leave their homes since 2023, like here in Zanuta, where the houses in the distance have all been destroyed. The villagers left in a hurry after settler attacks that followed the 7th of October, but the Israeli courts have just granted them the right to return. The military police have cordoned off the area, and Israeli activists have come to accompany the Palestinians. Sam is in charge of taking photos of the settlers' number plates.
To document everything that's happening, to show that the settler harassment has begun and the community isn't even back yet. That's why we're here, to offer our presence to mitigate any sort of harassment or violence from the settlers, and to make sure that as much as possible the army and the police and the state follow through on their obligation according to the Israeli court system.
אסור כניסה לישראלים. אתה בצו סגור. בשטח פרטי. He doesn't seem to bother. And then he said, I'm allowed to do everything. There is not such a thing like I'm not allowed to go there or there.
I'm the boss, I can do everything.
Yeah.
For this local Palestinian representative, the activist support is welcome.
This is a decision imposed by the Minister of Defense in the West Bank. The Zanuta area has been declared a closed military zone and is off limits to Israelis, but not to Palestinians. Unfortunately, this decision also targets solidarity activists. We just saw not long ago a settler enter on horseback, another in a car, and nobody, neither the army or the police, said anything to them.
The presence of the peace activists has not been enough today. Residents have decided to postpone their return home in fear of the settlers surrounding their village.
De l'importance. C'est une compétition qu'on a eu le bonheur de gagner. Cette équipe croate était finaliste sur la dernière édition, donc ça fait partie des objectifs de ce mois de mars qui détermineront la suite pour les 2 équipes aussi, à savoir la phase de qualification pour l'une des 2 ou le Final Four. L'objectif est le même.
That's it for this edition of Paris Direct. From all of us on the team, thank you very much for watching.
France 24 pushes digital news even further. France 24, a digital version. Economy, sports, news, special reports, all on demand. France 24, your first choice for news.
Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent.
France 24 special correspondents and reporters investigate the latest events making the news in Africa. Politics.
Young people are very involved and interested in these elections.
Economics.
It's such a high concentration.
Climate change.
I am proud of our generation.
Conflicts.
It's time to have a reparation.
Across Africa, what's happening across the continent? With Georgia Calvin-Smith on France 24.
Hello there, you're watching Around the World here on France 24. Thank you for joining us. I'm Erin Ogunkeye. These are the headlines we have for you this hour. A flurry of diplomatic activity in Europe as the continent looks